Fantastic. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind putting your phones on silent, that would be great. Welcome to Oriental Hall. On behalf of the American University in Cairo Press, I'm Laura Gribben, managing editor at the Press, and I'm delighted to welcome you and introduce to you our guests tonight, Professor Samia Mehrez and Mai Serhan, author of I Can Imagine It for Us. I wanted to actually start with Samia before I launch into Mai, if that's okay. Samia is perhaps more at home on this stage than most of us, having hosted the iconic Center for Translation Studies here in Oriental Hall, which I know that many of you attended. I recognize many faces here. Professor Emerita of Arabic Literature, Samia has dedicated years to AUC and to AUC Press, gifting us books like Egypt's Culture Wars, The Literary Life and Literary Atlas of Cairo, Translating Egypt's Revolution, and The Many Lives of Ibrahim Nagy. Her recent novel, Nadia's Empire, was published in Arabic, and following a delightfully quirky Sambuzi's exhibition on the Falaki campus, a much-anticipated annotated book is forthcoming. While Samia's public profile is towering, her behind-the-scenes role as a champion of her students is her superpower. She's been a mentor to both Mai and me since our days in her classroom, and her impact on both of our lives is profound. So in many ways, tonight feels like a beautiful full-circle moment for Samia as we celebrate Mai's memoir. Which leads me to Palestinian-Egyptian writer Mai Serhan. Mai's journey has taken her from the classrooms of AUC and NYU to earning her creative writing stripes at Oxford. She's already a published poet with The Undelivered Letters, published a few months ago by Duane, and a well-respected creative writing instructor and editor. Her memoir, I Can Imagine It for Us, was lovingly and meticulously crafted over years of revision and collaboration with her fellow writers. She penned it before October 7th, during a period of widespread silence on Palestine. That's when a 20-page sample made waves as a finalist for the Narratively Prize, drawing the attention of a top-tier agent and several publishers. But the climate shifted post-October 7th. The Frankfurt Book Fair, among others, spotlighted Israeli authors, and many Western publishers were more hesitant in signing Palestinian voices, at least early on. It was Samia, actually, always our guide, who pointed Mai in the direction of the press. I'd read an earlier draft, and Mai and I were brainstorming about how to pitch it. In a market saturated with memoirs, everybody is writing a memoir these days, you typically need a huge hook or a famous name. Mai's manuscript needed neither. Its power was so self-evident that it received an instant and unanimous green light from everyone at the press. I wanted to extend my deep thanks to my colleagues, Nadine, Nadia, and Sue, for their unwavering belief that this story must be heard, and to Susan and Shahden at the back for their work in amplifying it. As an editor, it's quite exceptional to work with an author who's already put her text through the ringer. Rewriting and refining relentlessly, Mai's not just meticulous with her words, but also careful about the shape of her lines on the page. We spent hours with our designer moving text around to create the exact visual rhythm and the pauses she wanted for her readers. I wanted to thank David, our designer, for his patience with us. This book was truly shaped by many hands along the way, a testament to Mai's collaborative spirit and process, which she can tell you more about. I'm sure you'll be interested in that. Mai's memoir shows how deeply the ripples of 1948 are felt across generations and in the diaspora. And I was privileged to get a glimpse of this earlier this year in Beirut, staying with her auntie Nadia. Mentioned in the book, Nadia was forced to leave Palestine as a child, and now that single painful journey is the story she tells on loop, pointing to a large key on her wall. This is one of the reasons for me why Mai's book is so urgent now. As this Nakba generation ages, their stories must be gathered. Mai weaves this legacy into her own, from a pre-1948 inherited past to a childhood spent in China, Beirut, Dubai, and Egypt. It's a deeply absorbing tale. but one that, in the words of Shireen Saikeli, evokes a wider Palestinianness, showing how a single moment of rupture connects millions of Palestinians. In a time of genocide and the violent suppression of Palestinian voices, this memoir shows us why literature like this matters. Its significance lies in the gathering of scattered stories, of fragmented archives and oral narratives, but also as an act of resistance in terms of memory and remembering, and in imagining. With that, I would like to hand over to Samia and to Mai for a wider discussion of the book, and you're in for a treat. There'll be some time for questions after, so please save those until the end. And for those that want to have their book signed by Mai, you'll be able to purchase a copy or have your book signed at the end. So before I hand over, there's one more thing Susan asked me to mention. There'll be another talk on Thursday, the 6th of November, at the Netherlands Flemish Institute in Zamalek with Yusuf Raka, and details will be posted on this soon. So let me hand over to Samia. This is your mic.
Thank you, Laura, for a very gracious introduction. This evening is a very emotional moment for me for many of the reasons that Laura has already mentioned. My relationship to the space, but also the fact that I'm flanked by two outstanding women who I have the privilege to call former students, not just former students, but very close friends today. And I am overjoyed, really, to be in conversation with Mai today. I've known Mai since she was 18, so it takes us a very long time. And I have watched her grow in so many directions as a scholar, as a poet, as a translator, as an essayist. What else do you do? And then this gift, this exquisite gift that we have before us today. So again, it's a privilege to be in conversation with Mai about her memoir. So I'm going to start and take it from the top and ask you what inspired you to write a memoir at this stage of your life, and to what extent did your diasporic experience, which we see in the book you take us, I mean, the geographies are immense. We go from Cairo to Cyprus, to Beirut, to China, to Dubai. How does that diasporic experience shape the text or the narrative?
Hello. Yes. Okay, so this memoir began actually as a writing prompt in 2017. I attended a writing residency at AUC, and they asked us to write like a 500-word piece on where we're from. So I wrote the seed of this book then. And a few years later, I was shortlisted for the master's degree at Oxford, and there was a telephone interview. And one of the questions they asked was, what do you have in the pipeline? Like, you shared with us a few short stories, but do you have anything bigger you want to work on for year two? And I told them about this book. And the reason was that I used to always tell stories about my time in China to my friends. And at that point, the father of my kids told me, you know, one day you have to write this story. And he's the one who said, no one else has written a book about two Palestinians in China. This is a very unique story, and it should be at the heart of this book. So yeah, like at the beginning, like going into bookshops abroad and looking at the Palestinian literature, I've never seen any literature that mirrored my experience. The books were mostly, and I told you that from the beginning, like about the olive tree, these common tropes that we've seen over and over again, the olive tree and the orange tree and the key of return and so on. It just did not mirror my experience. I am someone who is 2 generations down the line, a woman. I'm a product of a globalized, dispersed, transnational, post-Nakba, post-Oslo condition. So I did not see that literature around, so I felt like there is a book to write here. And also, like, because my program was hybrid and I really enjoy writing across genres, I felt like I can write a book that is not the traditional memoir, but something that can contain so many different forms depending on what I want to say at what point. What else? What else? Why now? So why now? Because the first reason is because I had to write something for year 2, but also I had grown really tired of just walking around life in Egypt, you know, with this hidden history that no one knows about, and it was just so silent at the time. It was 2001 when I started writing, so Palestinians were talking, but the world wasn't listening. It was just a dead cause at that point, and I just needed to, you know, just register my presence at that point. And that's why the book is, if you think that it's quite intense, it's because it was so silent and it was just like, it felt like an explosion. I wanted to say everything I wanted to say at a moment that was very silent. But also it's a matter of ownership, you know. It's important to name the families and the villages and who we were and our family histories. And there was a big conversation around turning it into fiction, like classifying it as fiction. And I'm so glad we didn't, because it is important to work against erasure, you know, and name us, you know, and put us on the map, because there is no map, you know, our names are lost, our histories are lost. So it was very important to make this book a memoir. Yeah.
Which brings me to the next question, because, I mean, this is a very dense, small book, but it contains a globe. I mean, you can't hear me. I'm sorry, I forget. But small and dense as it is, it's very rich in content, let's say, and in archival material in particular. So my question to you is, can you tell us about the archival research that you undertook to imagine it for us?
Okay, so as you know, I have never been to Palestine, and there was very little material to work with because my father rarely spoke about Palestine to us. Like, there are a few examples of when he did, and they're in the book. One of them is when he lined us up, me and my cousins and my sister, in Lebanon, and he said, when I call your names, I want you to step forward and tell me your full names and where you're from. And that took like 5 minutes, you know, but it really stuck with me. That moment really stuck with me. In a way, he kind of tied our lineage to the land, and it became kind of this very quick indoctrination, you know. Besides that, he only spoke about, oh, we had horse stables, oh, we had a wine cellar. But he would say things like that and just walk off, like he did not want to elaborate. So that's what I got from my father. And then when I decided to write this book, I went to Beirut and I met with his confidant, someone very close to him. And we went out for dinner and we spoke for hours and kind of psychoanalyzed my father. And then he took me to his aunt, who's 94 years old, or was 94 at the time. Her name is Hajja Fatme. And she lives in South Beirut by the Burj al-Brajnik refugee camp, which is composed of 95% of the refugees in this camp are from my village, Al-Kabri. So I went and I spent the day with her. I recorded everything with her. She used to work at my grandfather's house in Akka. So, and in 1948, she remembers everything so clearly. She told me everything about the Exodus, what happened, how did that day start, you know. So I interviewed her. And then they gave me a book that was written by one of the refugees in the camp. A rough translation, it would be Al-Kabri, A Heavenly Grove, okay? And it was, the cover art was just this very verdant, fruity, colorful, you know, little secret garden with a waterfall. And it looked like something so cocooned and so safe and so anchored. And the book had everything. Like, this guy documented every little detail about the village. The village no longer exists. So it had so much about what kind of fruits were there, vegetables, birds, what people cooked, the games people played, funerals, weddings, who are the families, what did they do, everything, everything. And I spent the summer underlining and highlighting everything. And one of the biggest discoveries in this book was how influential my grandfather was. Like, I knew he was a prominent political figure in Acre, but I just did not think that it went beyond the family stories. And this book kind of confirmed that it's widely recognized. He was mentioned so many times. So that was the main source of my research. But also, there's my aunt, who's the last surviving member of the Nakba generation. She lives in Beirut. She's 89 years old. She has dementia, and all she talks about is Palestine. She doesn't remember who I am, but she remembers Palestine. She will talk about the Nakba and tell the same stories every 5 minutes, over and over again. And that, for me, wasn't a limitation. It was kind of, when I was thinking about what this book is going to be about, the idea that the memory is lost was kind of an advantage for me, because I was so excited by the idea of autofiction and like imagining parts of it, and half fact, half fiction, you know. And so and because I love poetry so much, I thought I will imagine it in a very lyrical way, you know, and it will be elevated into this mythical place, like, that comes almost from the Bible, like the Garden of Eden. And especially because I found out that there were 4 springs in this little village, and these 4 springs watered the whole of Palestine. It was extremely lush. So that kind of gave it also this biblical, you know, elevated status. So I took it from there, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, you mentioned just now, you mentioned just now how adamant your father was about rooting you in your Palestinianness, placing you in front of him, having you tell your names and say that I am Palestinian since you were small. But just as he grounds you deeply in this Palestinian identity, he seems equally driven by an obsession with moving on. He's constantly on the move, as we see in the book. You yourself say, poof, and he's gone. Despite his illness and his amputated foot that tie him to a kind of physical and symbolic limitation. How do you understand that tension between rootedness and restlessness in him, but eventually in you as well?
Well, I see it as he was uprooted, right? So he had no other option but to keep moving. So it's 2 sides of the same coin. You're uprooted, and you have no place to anchor yourself. So you're going to keep moving, maybe for distraction, or to forget, or to suppress, or to escape, or to just literally move on because you don't know what else to do. And the metaphor of the amputated foot, I don't know if everyone's read here, but my father had severe diabetes, and in the last 2 years of his life, he developed gangrene, and a year before he died, we had to amputate his foot. So that becomes the central metaphor of the book. And for me, it was so clear that this would be a metaphor for displacement, for exile, for transnationalism, the idea that you have no place to go, so you're going to keep moving until you literally kind of fall off a precipice and be cut off life itself, you know? So that was the idea. Yeah.
I think you're going to read now. We forgot to mention that Mai will be reading some excerpts that are in dialogue with some of the questions. This is 101 to 104.
Okay, just to give you some context, this part is after we amputate the foot, and he's supposed to be recovering in bed in Beirut, and he decides to go out. Beirut, 2001. Baba leaves the hospital after a successful amputation and returns to the apartment in Corniche al-Mazra. 2 days later, it's time for a bath. I sit him on a stool in the bathtub and turn to face the wall while he takes off his clothes. I have never seen him naked. I need your help getting my pants off, he says. I turn and see no details, only lasting impressions. Body beaten, skin in tatters, fossil, father. I straighten his leg, prop his bandaged foot on the bathtub ledge. I hold on to his trouser cuffs and gently slip them over his bandaged foot. The rot is now sanitized with sprays and ointments, but the stench of decaying skin is still lodged in my chest. I reach out for the sponge and the soap, lather one with the other, and squeeze the sponge over his body. We lie on 2 single beds that evening. By nightfall, he's restless. He's not built to stay in one place. Come on, he says, let's go. Go where? Let's go for a walk in the Solidaire. No way. I'm not going. He sits up, pulls himself along until he reaches the foot of the bed. You are not going, I say. He grabs a shirt, puts it on. What are you doing? I'm going. No, you're not. Shh. No. Shh. He drags his foot to Solidaire, and we stop in a hookah cafe where he orders a coffee and lights a cigarette. We sit quietly for a long time, looking in different directions. What? He eventually says. What? Talk to me. About what? Something light, he says. All right, I say, turning to face him. This is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. They told you to stay home. The doctor said that. Ya Allah, shh. No. Ya Mai, ya Habibti. I cannot retire and come live here. Why? I'm not done. What more? You want to know? He stubs a cigarette in the ashtray and lights another one, draws a deep breath before moving closer to me. I'm done being an agent, the middleman, he whispers in my ear. I want to be the source. What do you mean, the source? I'm building my own factory. For what? Children's clothing. I feel like shaking him, like pulling my hair out. But instead, I turn my whole body away and pretend to people watch. Mai, order a taxi, he says suddenly. I turn to look at him. His head is unscrewed on his neck. His eyes are fading. I grab his chair before he falls off. Baba, are you okay? Just order a taxi. I make a phone call, place the taxi order, and try to give him a sip of my lemonade. He refuses. When the driver calls to say he's waiting on the street corner, I lift him off his chair and put his arm around my shoulder. He drags his right foot forward for a few meters, then his body gives in. The world turns and he collapses to the ground, bringing me down with him. I get up. I don't know if he's dead or alive, so I start screaming. Baba sits in the passenger seat of the taxi, eyes closed, and it's pouring rain outside. Listen, he says, don't you dare tell Teta or Amto or anyone back home what just happened. Understood? Back home, he greets the family and slumps on the nearest chair. They begin to criticize him for going out. They tell him he should consider retiring. They question why he still wants to be in China. They argue that he's made enough to now rest and live a good life. My father can no longer walk, cannot escape from room to room, so he lowers his gaze and says nothing. Everyone drifts back to Lebanese politics on TV. I go out on the balcony and close the shutters, lock myself out. Outside, the rain is pouring and the cold grips my skin. The balcony tiles are wet. My coat will soon be soaked, but I don't care. I slide my back down the wall until my butt lands in the puddle, and I stay there.
Okay, let's talk about structure for a bit. I mean, obviously, one of the striking features of the memoir is the fact that you rely on fragmented narrative in order to imagine it for us. And it seems to mirror, therefore, the ruptures of displacement and memory. Yet within that fragmentation, there's a remarkable sense of control. It's curated very carefully. Could you speak about how you balanced that tension between rupture and mastery, between fragmentation and coherence?
Yeah. So I see this, what you're saying, as a way of literally taking control of the narrative. You know, it's a narrative that's chaotic, but I'm choosing to be very coherent. You know, it's a narrative about erasure, but I'm choosing to remember or imagine even, you know. It's a narrative about silence, but it's kind of a scream, as I said, you know. So my job as a storyteller is to keep your attention, even if it's fragmented. You know, I will rip this story apart, but I will still challenge you to not put it down. That's the idea, you know. Like, even if it's a story that's going to take you left and right, I will keep you focused. That's the idea. So how this is done is, so at the very beginning, the idea was I had 3 storylines, okay? I had Palestine, pre-1948, culminating into the occupation. And I had my formative years between many countries, culminating in my parents' divorce. And I had China, me and him in China, culminating into his death. So I saw that as the climax. These 3 storylines would kind of collapse over each other and form the highest point of tension in the story, you know, the peak, you know. Weaving it and then going towards resolution, it would become, I would start referring to it as Israel and start looking at how it's changing. But also, the second part was a detective story. It's the idea that the money is stolen, the money that he's worked so hard for 10 years is gone. And there are so many suspects. I'm in this very strange country that I don't know anyone, I don't know the language. And there are just so many suspects, and it's like a whodunit story. And that's also a kind of story that keeps you reading because it's a puzzle. And you kind of dangle all these clues, and then you don't know if it's this or that. But the idea is to build up anticipation, you see. How to give you a piece of the puzzle, but not the complete thing. And so you keep turning the page. How to foreshadow. How to, for example, you mentioned the other day, the first line of the book. It says, I am 24 when they amputate my father's foot. And that kind of encapsulates the whole story, but it also drags you in. It just makes you fall into the story, you know? So these things were carefully done. It's all intentional so that you keep reading, you know? What else?
Variations of modes of writing, from the lyrical to the sort of narrative to dialogue to that also is a different level of balance.
Yeah. So the idea I had read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and it really, really inspired me, because what he said was that the novel is like Noah's Ark, and it can contain all forms. And from the very beginning, when I pitched this memoir during my studies, I said this is not going to be a traditional memoir. This is going to be a hybrid text. It's going to contain the essay, epistolary, a historical account, poetry, everything. You know, whatever serves the text, whatever serves the story, I will break and use that mode of writing. With epistolary, for example, it relies a lot on confession and intimacy, and it feels like you are not the person who's being addressed in the book. You say you're reading the book, it's addressed to my father. So it feels like you're reading something you're not supposed to read, which draws you more in, you see. So that was the idea with my father. I was confessing, and you were in on something that you were not supposed to hear. And that in itself has its own kind of, you trespass, but it's naughty, it's wrong, but you want to do it. So that's, with Acre, I used a very lyrical tone, because lyricism is all about imagination and beauty, so I needed to be extremely lyrical with but also then you have the story, the plot. I wanted a strong plot. I wanted a story that you can put down, a page turner. So the fragments are designed in such a way where there's a lot of cliffhangers. So something very dramatic happens, and then I cut. And I go into another thread, So it keeps you, okay, I want to go back to this, so I don't leave you for too long. I leave it. I go into Palestine, for example, for a little bit, give you a rest from a very propulsive kind of pace, and I slow down maybe with an essay form, or I slow down with lyricism and acre and community and the joy there, and then I take you back because you want to know what happened with that story in China, So these are all dramatic effects, that hold the text together. It's to say that even though our history is in pieces, I can still hold it together, Yeah.
I think you had a passage here that we decided you may want to read from on page 17 to 25.
Okay, since we were talking about dramatic structure, the dramatic arc, this point is the inciting incident. And an inciting incident is that point in the narrative early on where it's what happens to set the whole narrative moving. That's the point. We're here. So Nermeen and I share a bedroom in Abu Dhabi and many times over in Cairo. We share a bedroom until she marries, and until then we fight like cats and dogs from home to home and room to room. While we do, our father moves from country to country, chasing the buck. He tries his hand at a few jobs and recycles through failed business ventures with no luck, then comes back. When he comes back, I wait for him by the window, for his head and his bags to pop out of some car pulling up. Nermeen and I fight like cats and dogs until one day it's my mother, Nermeen, and me, and my father is puff, gone. Cairo, 2000. He's in China now, so far from us, finally making a busy building an empire in the export business. He comes to Cairo from time to time with bags full of catalogs, product samples, and scraps of cloth. I wish for gifts which he never brings, and yet I rummage through his bags nevertheless. I search his suitcase once and find a photo in a picture frame. The photo is of a young Chinese woman carrying a baby girl. I ask him who they are. Is she his new wife? Is this his baby? But Baba lowers his gaze and slips from room to room. The apartment on Arabi Street is bare, except for the necessities. The ceramic floors are rugless, the walls are naked, and there are no plants to tend. My mother, no longer daddy's girl, nor any man's woman, goes to work to make a living for us. She takes some basic computer skill courses and becomes a secretary in a business hotel by the pyramids. Baba calls one day, he dials +202, he calls us. Listen, I'm getting old and I'm running a huge business here. If I go, it goes with me, unless you come and I show you the ropes. Come where? To China. To China? If you come, it's going to be yours one day. If you don't, we lose it all. You'll have everything you want here. But Baba, I studied literature. I have nothing to do with business. Literature? What are you going to do with that? Be a writer? Ha! I go to China. I go because where I'm from is not on the map, not anymore. So I seek the edges and I overlook the borders. I go because I've inherited a gene that roams, and the restless foot is mine to bear too. The ghosts of the past are calling me, asking me to follow in their footsteps, to keep walking out and out. To stop is to know I am out of place, so I move from place to place. Perhaps in the farthest lands I might cease to feel like a stranger. Perhaps in leaving the world as he knows it, my father finally found peace, so I follow. 2 Palestinian renegades running towards the outpost, thinking we can leave ourselves behind, thinking we can run until we vanish with all our ghosts. Sinjin, 2000. China has more self-made female billionaires than any other country in the world. In fact, half of the world's wealthiest female billionaires are Chinese. My father is about to introduce me to one of them. Miss Zuying Huyan prevails over a global high-end handbag brand. There are 4 of us going to meet her. Talal, a Lebanese client living in Brazil, Hongzi, our Chinese interpreter, Baba, and me. He hits the top floor button in a glass elevator that overlooks the Sinjin River, and we shoot up through a cool mist until the river disappears from sight. The boardroom is a latex white on latex white vision of the future, and my father seems intoxicated by the prospect of striking a lucrative deal. He's been raving about this woman for days, which makes me wonder, what makes her less mara than me? I hear her heels like a drum roll and they all stand up, so I do too. She is tiny when she enters with an entourage, and she's wearing an all-white 2-piece designer suit. My daughter, Baba says proudly, pointing at me. I step forward and she greets me with a hard handshake, then takes her place at the head of the table. We all sit down. Baba is slouched in a made-in-China Tommy Hilfiger windbreaker double his size. He turns his gaze down, the door opens, and Miss Huyan's staff bring in a collection of designer bags for our viewing. The bags are beautiful, wrapped in tissue, placed in boxes, tied in ribbons, slipped in posh pouches. In my notepad, I judicially write the date, her name, our client's name, and the brand name. Only soon after I realize there are no notes to take really, just a show to sit back and watch. There is a game that ancient Chinese politicians used to play. It's called Ku Shui Lui Shang, and it involves floating a glass of wine down a shallow creek. Whoever is sitting where the glass lands must drink and write a poem. Today, the game is played across boardrooms in China to win deals and establish hierarchies of power. The idea is to use your silver tongue to drink your opponent under the table. If you can prove your eloquence, negotiating power, and trustworthiness after the umpteenth drink, then you preside over a deal or win a promotion. I watch as Beiju, a clear white spirit, is served. The coffee boy places a cup in front of me, but a sideway glance from my father tells me to stay out of this. Miss Huyan stands up and makes the first toast, the gambé, as they call it, or the dry glass. I continue to fiddle awkwardly with my pen as they all raise their glasses and shoot the first cup down. Mrs. Huyan slams her cup on the table and calls for Baba to go next to make a toast, but he doesn't stand up or make a toast. He remains slouched in his seat and in monotone introduces his Lebanese client as a billionaire in his own right. I know how this game will go because I've witnessed his ways before. When he lived with us back in Cairo, he and I would often play Monopoly. He would buy me out of every property from Old Kent Road to Mayfair, then relentlessly tease me for losing until I broke down in tears. It didn't matter that I was a child, that I was his child, or that it was just a game. The thrill of winning trumped all. Now he's at it again, never mind the traditional Chinese saying that when one drinks with a friend, 1,000 cups are not enough. He's not here to make friends or play nice. He's here to win, his way, and fuck all else. Mrs. Huyan takes note and for the next 3 hours or so has one mission in mind, to drink my father under the table at any cost. I watch him steadily slam one cup after the other as she falters and her team drops out one after the other. But the woman is determined. She asks for the red rice wine and the beer to drink between toasts, then moves our shrunken party to a smaller all-glass room. They drink more and more and talk business less and less until her red rice wine spills on her white suit. My father takes this as a sign that the game is over. He stands up, and we all do too. She is slouched in her chair when he gives her ruddy hand a hard handshake. Tell her we have a lot more to discuss, he tells Hongzi. Let her people call me when she's ready. We have 48 hours in Sinjin before we fly out.
From here, I'll take you to some of the reactions to your book, and it's been described by more than one reader, reviewer, as a brave and courageous. What does courage mean to you in the act of writing? Is it about truth-telling, exposure, or persistence in the face of uncertainty?
First of all, I did not think of myself as brave when I was writing this book. I do think of an audience only in terms of craft, how good the line lands on the page, but I don't think of people's reaction to the story itself. I never thought about that. I was in a bubble. I was writing something as truthfully as I can. I was not after factual truth only. I was after an emotional truth. It's just that I wanted to write the truest sentence I can. That was the whole point, to hit that raw nerve in you so that you yourself as a reader embody my experience, kind of get under my skin, be me, feel this pain, feel this grief, feel this loss for yourself. And when I did that, I didn't have the Arab reader in mind as much as the Western reader. I wanted this book to make a difference abroad. I wanted people who have never studied Palestine in their curricula, don't see it in the news, to actually feel what this feels and kind of to convert them. I wanted that conversion to take place with this book. So for that, I relied on a very emotional truth, and I relied a lot on poetry and language, a very evocative kind of language that can do the heavy lifting, I've committed to memoir, so there's no half-truths with memoir. I have to go all the way. And I don't see it as, what's the word you used? you used a word other than truth. Yeah, exposure. You said exposure. I did not see it as exposing myself. I feel like the word exposure has this kind of sensationalism that I wasn't after. I think the book has a lot of formal qualities, so it's not a sensational book, you know. I worked with themes that I've studied all my life, you know, through the literature, and you know, and I knew how to make them, use them in my own story, and that was it. So I didn't think about it as courage. Yeah.
That's courageous.
Yeah. Now. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to that first line, because it really is a slap on the reader's face, you know, that I'm 24 and my father's foot has just been amputated and he's going to drag it for a year. And we sort of give us, we know what's going to happen, almost, it's all there in a nutshell. And then you keep reminding, I mean, it becomes a leitmotif, the foot and the amputation. The smell, it's getting worse. We go to hospital and you are constantly tending and attentive and worried about that foot. And so, of course, as you said, you transform that amputation into the metaphor, really, that will hold the narrative together at a certain level. But it's not a question anymore because you replied already. And I was going to say, you know, traditionally we are accustomed in many novels, whether they be Western or non-Western, that the homeland is gendered as female, you know. It's always the female who carries that metaphor of homeland. But in your work, obviously, you displace this metaphor onto the male body instead. So can you talk to us a bit about what that meant as you were writing, how you understood it, as you sort of dwelled on it throughout the narrative, the levels at which you were engaging it?
Okay, I'll start with the first part when you say that I keep saying that he's going to die in a year, and to what effect is that? Another book that I read that did this so effectively was In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. What he does is he tells you that this family is all going to be killed. Okay, you know that from the blurb at the back, on the back. But then he spends the first 100 pages completely attaching you to this family. And you know that there's like this devastating outcome that's about to happen. It's like this impending doom in the book. So you're like, when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? I'm getting so attached. Please, no, don't let this happen. So I kind of did the same thing. I wanted to tell you he was going to die. So the question becomes how? And you want to follow to know how this is going to happen. So that's that. But anyway, the question is about displacing the idea of the raped homeland, you know, onto the body of a male. So yeah, like traditionally, it's the woman who is being raped or exploited or dispossessed, and it's this bodily violation in literature, right? But the first thing is that it actually happened to my father, not my mother. My father is the Palestinian one, so I had him. That's the truth, that's the story. But also I was very aware that I was doing this displacement and what that meant, because it's not just the women that are dispossessed, you know. And this bodily violation is something that I think men suffer from a lot more than women, because women have these networks of support. They are allowed to express themselves. They heal because they have each other and they're allowed to do that. But men don't, it's kind of a social stigma to like show weakness or show vulnerability or cry, or so men don't heal as fast as women. And that's especially the case with my father, because he's never spoken about what burdened him so much, you know. And here you have it, like I have 4 uncles and 1 aunt. All the men are dead. She's still alive because she talks, you know. But also the idea that men are the ones who are expected to provide for the family. They're the ones who are more out in the public spaces. They are traditionally the hunters that go out and come back. So what happens when you cut that man's legs off? You know, you are eliminating his power, his masculinity, his agency. Everything is gone. So yeah, there is a bodily violation, and it was real in real life, and it made sense in the book as well, you know. But also the idea of addressing him in the form of a letter. You know, letters in literature was very much a female writing form. Okay, women used to write to their men who were at war or in prison. And I wanted to address him in a letter because he's not comfortable with intimacy. And I knew that it was so necessary for him to listen to what the story is about Palestine, because it's the thing that he evaded all his life. So I wanted that his full attention in letter form. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, this is probably a question that you've gotten asked before because you write in English, right? And in this case, it's a memoir, and Palestinian literature has historically thrived predominantly in Arabic, right? Only recently have we seen, this plethora of works in English. How do you personally navigate the tension between global reach and accessibility for monolingual Arab audiences? And is this a concern at all for you?
Yeah, so my primary drive to write this book was to connect to people like me. I know that there are 7 million Palestinians in diaspora. Well, obviously the statistics are not accurate, but this is the number we always get online. Okay, 7 million. And I felt very isolated in my experience here, all my life, isolated. And the first drive was to connect. And these Palestinians in the diaspora are have assimilated into other cultures, and English has become the common language, okay? I wanted to reach, as I said, the Western reader, okay? And I wanted to speak about the Palestinian story to the Western reader, marginalized stories, giving voice, underrepresented voices. So I see that as a bridge. I've never seen it as a limitation. I see that there's a lot that I've learned in English about craft and writing modes that's not available to us in Arabic. So I have the freedom, the creative freedom to write in English. But yeah, obviously, one of the priorities once this book is now out is to get it published in Arabic so that people who can't read in English can read it. But that was the priority now, and that's the language of my education, my work, my practice. That's the language I'm in command of. Yeah.
Okay, one more, this will be the final question, and you have one more passage, I suppose, that you would like to read after you respond to the question. So in your memoir, you share that your father once mocked you for wanting to study literature, and you just read the passage where he said, you want to study literature. Yet in the end, you give him voice through your writing. How do you see that tension between his skepticism and the way you carry him in your literary text? Do you see this as an act of reconciliation, resistance, or perhaps both? What do you mean? What does it mean for you personally to honor him in writing, despite his doubts about your literary path?
I think if he's looking from behind the grave now, he'd be very positively surprised, because I think I proved him wrong. First of all, my dad did not know how to survive in any other way than being the tough businessman that he was. He saw money and the accumulation of money as the only currency for survival. And I understand why, because in the absence of a state, in the absence of security or an independence, it is the only way to protect yourself in a world that there's no roof over your head. You're just like by yourself. So I understand where he comes from, but I think, and I do say at one point in the book, that you did not have to battle in obscurity. You know, that silence, you did not have to do that. You did not have to die and not be accounted for as a Palestinian. You know, that all, I think so first of all, I think I proved him wrong. And I think that I gave him voice, and I honored him, and I honored the family legacy, and I gave voice to my country. So I think he is probably proud, hopefully, and I am making money out of literature, so it's all good.
Okay, you were going to read.
Yeah.
Let's end with that. Page 54.
54.
54 to 60.
Okay. China, 2000. Working long hours is an unwritten rule in China, and my father has lived here so long that this work ethic now defines him too. In fact, he has more reason to persist over hardship, to work through exhaustion. If he stops, he will see that what his ghost looks like, so he never stops. He's relentless. Every day a different town or province on flights that whisk us from chilling winter to monsoon summers. New clients, factories, boardrooms, markets, warehouses, around-the-clock meetings and late-night negotiations, sleepless nights in five-star hotels, office apartments, endless green mountains on the road, and everywhere an entourage. Cha-ching, cha-ching is the only sound he hears, and every move, every mile is calculated to rake more. Wuhan, 2000. After Guangzhou, Baba, Hongzi, and I fly to Wuhan and check into the Westin Hotel. I've been following him around since 6 a.m. when he boarded that plane. His client here is a Lebanese businessman living in Chile, a tycoon of the textile business, and Baba is fired up. We go from airport to hotel, from hotel to factory, from factory to office, from office to warehouse, and from warehouse to marketplace. At 10 p.m., Baba wants to take the meeting to our hotel reception, and that is when I bow out. I just can't. At 2 a.m., I wake up to a knock on the door. I open, and it's him, arms draped on Hongzi's shoulders, head slumped, eyes closed. He's overworked, and he's fainted. Hongzi lays him in bed and helps me take off his jacket and eyeglasses. I put his key and bundle of cash bound in an elastic band on the bedside table. I straighten his body in bed, make him comfortable. I take off his shoes and his socks. I notice that the skin on the right foot is moist and turning a yellowish gray. I notice Hongzi turning blue in the face. The stench of rot filling the room is unbearable, and soon I turn blue too. Hongzi points at his foot. He mumbles, "Qadamu." EU, 2000. Baba and I catch a flight 2 days later to EU, and Hongzi flies back to Xinjiang to attend to more business. Although Baba has an apartment here, we stay in the Shangri-La Hotel, a few minutes from the small commodities market, and leave the apartment to his EU assistant, U. U is introduced to me in the hotel lobby on a rainy day. She's different. Unlike the giggly women who fawn over my father in other towns, she's stone-faced. Her flared lip, though, betrays her, forming a sensuous hole in her impenetrable front. We head to the restaurant where I order a filet mignon from the international menu, and she orders tofu and steamed rice. I observe the way U eats. She has a carnivorous way of eating non-carnivorous things, almost predatory, and beads of sweat billow on her forehead. When she speaks, though, it is only in whispers in Baba's ear. Something about that rubs me the wrong way, and I speak to him in Arabic so she doesn't understand. I state the obvious, that it's pouring rain outside. My socks are soaked inside my sneakers. I do not have a jacket or umbrella. I desperately need winter clothes. He tells U to finish her lunch and take me shopping. U and I split from my father to go shopping. She walks in front of me on the high street. Every time I try to catch up with her, she picks up her pace. We walk into a shop and I begin to look through the racks, but she has her arms folded on her chest and her shoe won't stop tapping the floor. Ooh, I don't think you want to be here. No, I don't, she says. That's all right, you don't have to. Just give me the hotel business card. I'll finish and come back on my own. She hands me the business card and without saying goodbye, leaves. I walk in and out of shops, buying what I need and then try to hail a taxi, but no one is willing to take me. Drivers look at the address on the business card and drive off without an explanation. An hour passes and I'm ambushed once again by curious bodies and ogling eyes. I see them, call their shopkeepers, friends and neighbors. Come, check out this strange-looking girl, a foreigner. I am drenched in rain and about to collapse when I hand one of the gawking men the business card in my hand. They all gather around him while the card gets passed from hand to hand. There is a big discussion about the address, one I do not understand. I wait until the shop metal doors roll down and I still do not understand. Finally, a man in an auto rickshaw waves at me to hop in. I ride behind him on the auto rickshaw with no questions asked. He drives and drives through the night. He drives past closed shops and over highways, under bridges and across glistening expressways. I do not recall the distance being this far, the time being this long. Suddenly, we arrive at a toll station and drive through that too. I wonder if I'm in a different town or a different province altogether. I have no idea. The highways are wide, and the mountains on either side are neon green and grand in the dark. There are no vehicles on the road, big or small, just this man and me on a wheezing auto rickshaw. I cannot communicate my worry to him, so it multiplies. The thought of being kidnapped takes hold of me. Not exactly the religious type, I hang on to the only thread left, prayer. The hours eventually dwindle into minutes. We hit a busy town, and I'm a born-again believer. Alhamdulillah, I mumble under my breath. We get stuck in traffic, and I am joyous. I spot the Shangri-La Hotel's glitzy facade. My driver drives up the ramp where I spot Baba. He has both hands on his hips, and his face is the color of burning coal. I jump out of the auto rickshaw. It's who did this, Baba. She left me there. She wanted to get me lost. He wants to hit me. I can see the rage travel through his body, towards his hands. Are you listening to me? Your daughter was abandoned. That bitch, she didn't tell me we drove to another town. She knew I'd get lost and she still left me. Shut up, he says. She left me on purpose, Baba. You have to do something. Fire her. Acre, pre-1948. You never liked school. Maybe because the house in El Cabri was home, you preferred to stay there. Your mother would go around chit-chatting with the households, working women, the ones filling the barrels with rainwater and the ones boiling the bay leaf, the ones tending the cinchona trees and the ones grating the oranges. Your brothers all went to school without a fuss. Your sister Nadia did so well in her studies that your father sent her to Jerusalem to attend the exclusive Schmidt's Girls' College, where she learned German and English. But you, every day at 7:30 a.m., the same scene. You would lie supine on the floor like dead weight. Your father would try to lift you up and he would fail. You will go to school, he would say. I won't. He would pull you by the arm, by the ear. Why not? I don't want to. Why not? It gives me a headache. Your father, an effendi, son of an effendi, son of an effendi, could not wrap his head around the idea of an uneducated son. What was even more troubling to him was that you, a little boy, could get your own way with him. I put your photo next to his, Baba, and I know why you could get away with it. Because you looked exactly like him. The only differences were his mustache and tarbouche. With him, you got away because you were his shadow, long and dark ahead of him. Beyond that land, those years, were the unknown streets where you would roam towards a point of no return. He saw it in you, and it frightened him.
Thank you, Mai. This was very, what can I say? Very beautiful, let's say, and very rich. And I'm sure that people have a lot of questions for you.
You are part of a generation that has lived outside Palestine all your life. And I was wondering if you have dreams about the future, hopes that one day you will go back and rebuild Palestine, not you as you, but you as a generation, whole generation. Especially today, we are in the crossroads. Thank you.
Okay, so I was recently invited to this project that invited 12 Palestinians from all over the world to write about the future of Palestine, a liberated future for Palestine, perhaps 100 years from now, hopefully sooner, but that was the pitch, okay? And I found it very hard to do that. A lot of questions. I had so many questions about how are we all going to integrate? Like, how is the Palestinian who's a surfer in Australia bond with like a refugee in Jordan and me, and like we've become so different. We've assimilated into so many different cultures. So how is this going to work? And what are we going to do with all the Israelis there? Are we just going to kill them? Kick them out? I don't know. Like, what are we going to do? You know. So there were so many questions, and I found it very difficult, especially that we are watching this live stream genocide every day, and it's so hard in this kind of despair to look beyond it, you know, towards something that free Palestine one day. Like, it's so hard. But I was reminded that I wrote a book that was about the transformative power of political imagination. That's what this book is about. So I tried to do something similar, you know, like, so I went back in the written piece, and I imagined my daughter's wedding in Acre to a Palestinian from Jaffa, and that I'm rebuilding my grandfather's house, and that I'm still writing, but in Akka, and I've given up on my phone, and I'm just living in this little village, and, you know, what was your question? I think I drifted away, I don't know. But you talked about like a liberated Palestine in the future. Yeah, so that was my vision in this piece. I think I'll continue being a writer and just keep writing about it. You know, that's me, you know.
We have time for a couple more questions if anyone else wants to ask anything. Now's your moment. I think here and then here.
Hi, Mai. I'm a little bit curious about, as you were going through the story, as you were when you were 20 and 19, and going through the story with your father, did you feel that Palestinianness, the impact of him being Palestinian and you as well in the story, or did that come to you in retrospect as you looked back at the whole story in unity?
Do you mean, did I feel more Palestinian after writing the story? Is that the question?
More attaching the events and how your father's such a hunger for moving, did you feel at the time, did you make the connection back then how he felt that he knew he was Palestinian but he never really wanted to talk about it, or did this come to you as a full image at the end of your journey with him?
I think the writing of the memoir allowed me to process a lot of things, especially that I wrote it 25 years after the event. So it gave me so much life experience and time away to be able to reflect with some clarity on what was happening. When I was following him around China, no, I had no idea what was going on. It was a roller coaster. And it was just like, how do I get myself out of this? You know, I want to go back. So I didn't see it then, but I always knew that he was an outsider to us as a family. And wherever he went, I always saw him as, and that really, that's why I depict him as a very, I sympathize with him so much in the text, you know. It's so easy to call him cruel, you know, but I never saw it that way since I was a child. I always saw that he was suffering because he was an outsider. That was very clear to me. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you, May. I haven't read your book yet, but I look forward to reading it. I want to comment on something you said. You said it's hybrid. Your text is hybrid. In other words, you're talking about genres. You know, there are different genres in it. But aside from Baba, that comes over and over, are there any other linguistic hybridity? I mean, when Surah Al-Ibrahim wrote about his years in Russia, for example, in the 70s, he uses a lot of Russian words, okay? Joyce, when Joyce writes, you know, he has even Arabic words in his works and so on. So did you try to also be transnational in the sense of the languages, include, you know, expressions from here and there, or is it strictly English apart from Baba?
No, the parts that are in China actually have Chinese dialogue, and it's written in Chinese characters. I had to resort to a friend of mine who married a Chinese man, so I gave him the lines that I wanted to translate, and the point was to foreignize the text. It's a further level of alienation, you know. So yeah, when you read, you're going to see these Chinese characters in China, but also there's a bit of Arabic because I talk about the translator who follows us around in China. He speaks in Arabic Fusha, so he doesn't understand my Egyptian dialect, and I don't understand Cantonese. So we were speaking in Arabic Fusha, so there's Arabic Fusha occasionally in the book as well. And there are also these scenes that were, you know, very dramatic just because we didn't understand each other's language. Like one of the very first scenes in the book, I tell my dad, "Mad ga'arsh," which means "Kifaya ga'ir," I said, which means stop shouting. And he understood it as stop braying like a donkey. Because I spoke Egyptian and he didn't. So he slaps me. And that's like one of like really hot scenes in the beginning of the book. Another scene is we're in Lebanon and we're eating rolled vine leaves. And he says, "Go down and get me yogurt." He says, "Go down and get me Leban." So I go down and get a bottle of milk. And he gets really furious with me. And he's like, the scene, he's like banging the milk bottle. He's like, "This is milk. This is yogurt." So he used to get so frustrated that his kids, not his kids, me, my sister speaks Palestinian, that I didn't speak his language. It was just this extra level of alienation from his own offspring, you know.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more before we end. Anyone else? No? Samia, do you want to say anything to close, or are you good? May, do you want to say anything more before you finish?
No?
Okay, I think, thank you all so much. This has been really interesting. It's lovely to have Samia in conversation with May. And you can buy the book outside. May will be signing for a while. So please join us outside for a bit. Thank you so much.